The person inside the palace who betrayed Sheikh Hamdan, it came from inside. That is the part that makes this story different from every other chapter in the complicated life of Sheikh Hamdan. The losses he has carried, the loves that were taken, the promises that were broken, the private life that was repeatedly dismantled by forces outside his control. Most of those came from the expected directions, from the machinery of the royal family, from his father's decisions, from the political world that has always had more power over the shape of his personal life than he himself has been allowed to have. Those forces, as painful as their consequences have been, were at least legible. You could trace them, understand their logic, see where they came from and why they moved the way they moved. But this was different. This came from someone he trusted, someone who was inside the walls, someone who had access to the private version of his life that very few people are ever allowed to see. And the betrayal, when it came, changed things in a way that none of the external pressures ever quite managed to change them. Because you can rebuild after a storm. But rebuilding after a betrayal requires something different, something that takes much longer. And for a man like Hamdan, something that may never fully come back. The palace is not a single unified thing. That is what people outside it tend to misunderstand. From the outside, the Al Maktoum family appears as a monolithic force, powerful, coordinated, moving with the kind of collective intention that makes its decisions look inevitable and its management of the official story look seamless. But inside, like any institution built on human relationships and human ambition and human vulnerability, it is full of the ordinary complications that come with putting many people in close proximity to enormous amounts of power. There are loyalties, there are rivalries, there are people who have dedicated their lives to the family's interest, and people who, when the right pressure is applied or the right opportunity presents itself, discover that their loyalty has limits they had not previously been aware of. The person who betrayed Hamdan was one of the latter. Someone who had been close enough to see things that most people never get access to. Close enough to know about the private relationship he had been protecting. Close enough to understand the weight of what they were carrying and the consequences of what it would mean to share it with someone outside the circle of trust that Hamdan had placed them inside. They had that access. They had that knowledge. And at a certain point, for reasons that the people who have spoken carefully about this situation have never fully made explicit, they used it. What was shared was not a small thing. It was the kind of information that the palace had been working very hard to keep contained. Details about the private relationship, about the woman, about the specific nature of what Hamdan had been building away from the official story and the official image. The kind of detail that, in the wrong hands or in the wrong context, could become a problem that the palace's management machinery would have to work very hard to address. And that is exactly what it became, because the information moved in the way that information always moves when it is given to someone who was not supposed to have it, quickly, in directions that could not be fully controlled, creating exactly the kind of visibility that the official story had been designed to prevent. The consequences landed on multiple people simultaneously. On the woman whose private life suddenly had a visibility she had not chosen and could not entirely protect herself from. On the children whose existence was suddenly less invisible than the people around them had worked to keep it. And on Hamdan himself, who found out that something he had trusted someone to carry with discretion had been handed to people who had no right to it and no understanding of what it cost the people whose lives it was about. The discovery that the breach had come from inside, from someone he had allowed into the private circle, someone whose access to the real version of his life had been a gift of trust rather than a structural inevitability, changed the nature of the damage. External pressure is one thing, internal betrayal is another. It reaches further, it stays longer. And it changes not just how you feel about the person who betrayed you, but how you feel about the whole enterprise of trusting people with the real version of who you are. Hamdan's response, from what the people close to the situation have described, was characteristically controlled on the surface. He did not make a public statement. He did not address it officially in any way that would have confirmed the details that had been shared without his permission. The palace managed the consequences of the breach the way it manages all such consequences, quietly, efficiently, with the minimum amount of visible disruption possible. The person responsible for the betrayal was removed from proximity in the way that people in those circles are removed when they have become liabilities. Not dramatically, not with the kind of public accountability that might satisfy those of us watching from the outside, but effectively. Gone from the inner circle, gone from the access, gone from the version of Hamdan's life where their presence could cause further damage. But the removal of a person and the removal of the damage they caused are two different things. The breach could be closed. What had already moved through it could not be called back. And the specific quality of trust that Hamdan had extended to the person who betrayed him, the willingness to let someone inside the real version of a life that is mostly managed from the outside, was not something that the closing of the breach restored. That kind of trust, once broken in that way, does not simply rebuild on a new foundation. It rebuilds more slowly than anything else, with more deliberation, more caution, more awareness of the cost of getting it wrong a second time. His poetry from the period after the betrayal carries a quality that the people who read him most carefully noticed but found difficult to name: a withdrawal. Not from feeling. His feeling has never gone away and is probably never going to go away because it is simply part of what he is made of, but a withdrawal from the specific willingness to share the feeling with anyone. A pulling back that is different from the managed distance of the official image. More fundamental than that, the distance of a man who has been burned not by the world's cruelty, which he had always understood and learned to navigate, but by the specific human cruelty of someone he had chosen to believe in. That is a different lesson. And it leaves a different mark. There is a person somewhere right now who was inside Sheikh Hamdan's private circle and chose to use what they found there in a way he had not permitted. They know what they did. They know the weight of the thing they chose to carry out of those walls and hand to people who were not supposed to have it. And Hamdan, who has carried so many things quietly and with such consistent grace, has carried this too. In the poems that pulled back, in the circle that got smaller after the betrayal than it had ever been before, in the eyes that have always told the real story of what is happening inside a life that the official version will never fully show. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell. Every week I bring you to the real story of Sheikh Hamdan, the loyalties, the betrayals, and the truth about the people inside the palace walls that the official story was never going to tell you.